After my husband died, his kids walked right up to me with their legal team and said, "We want the estate, the business, and absolutely everything else." My lawyer, Desmond, practically begged me to fight them in court. He told me I had every right to the Sterling Empire. Instead, I looked at them and said, "You can have it all." Everyone in my circle thought I had lost my mind to grief. At the final hearing, I calmly signed the transfer papers. My stepchildren smiled triumphantly until their arrogant lawyer turned completely pale when he read the final clause. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever given greedy people exactly what they asked for, just to watch them destroy themselves. My name is Nia, and I am 42 years old. The rain in Atlanta was relentless that afternoon as we stood in the private Buckhead Cemetery. The heavy drops tapped against the sea of black designer umbrellas surrounding the open grave. We were burying my husband, Marcus Sr., who had built a massive real estate and logistics empire from the ground up. He was a brilliant man, but his greatest failure was his children. As the polished mahogany casket was lowered into the Georgia soil, I stood perfectly still. I wore a tailored black silk dress and maintained a posture of absolute stone. I did not shed a single tear because Marcus and I had already said our profound goodbyes in private. We had spent the last 6 months preparing for this exact day. Across the freshly turned earth stood my stepchildren Marcus Jr. and Chloe, performing their grief for the gathered elite of Atlanta society. They wailed and clutched each other, making sure every politician and business partner saw how devastated they were. It was a pathetic display considering they had spent the last 5 years trying to push their father out of his own company. Standing right beside Chloe was her husband Preston. He was a man who walked with an unearned sense of superiority, constantly trying to prove he was the smartest person in any room. Preston always viewed me with a thinly veiled disdain. To him, I was just the younger second wife, a black woman who had somehow manipulated her way into a billionaire family. He completely ignored the fact that I was a highly sought-after forensic accountant long before I ever met Marcus. Preston liked to play the mastermind behind Chloe, feeding her insecurities and directing her greed. As the service concluded, the crowd began to disperse toward the line of waiting town cars. The damp air felt suffocating, but I remained by the graveside for a final moment of quiet. That was when Preston detached himself from the group of mourners and walked over to me. He did not bother to offer a comforting word or even fake a sympathetic expression. He stopped just inches away, invading my personal space with a smug look on his face. "The show is over, Nia," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "The old man is gone, and your expiration date as the lady of the house has officially arrived." I turned my head slowly to look at him. His eyes were gleaming with a malicious kind of joy. He had been waiting for this moment since the day Marcus married me. "I am giving you exactly 48 hours to pack up whatever cheap clothes you brought into this family and get out of the Buckhead mansion." Preston continued, lowering his voice so the lingering guests would not hear. "We are changing the locks on Wednesday morning. Do not make us call the police to drag you out. You played a good game, but you are nothing but a gold digger. You never belonged in our world, and you are not getting another dime of sterling money." He waited for my reaction. He expected me to cry or scream or beg for more time. He wanted a scene. He wanted to point to me and tell the rest of the wealthy mourners that the gold digger was finally showing her true colors. I did not give him the satisfaction of a single emotion. I did not blink or frown or defend my marriage. I simply looked at him, studying the arrogant smirk on his face. I knew exactly what Preston and Marcus Jr. had been doing behind their father's back. I knew about the massive financial holes they had dug, and I knew that fighting them right now would only ruin the meticulous plan Marcus and I had put in place. So I offered Preston a faint, chilling smile. I let the silence stretch between us until his smirk began to falter just a fraction. Without saying a single word to acknowledge his ridiculous threat, I turned my back on him. I walked away with my head held high, my heels clicking steadily against the wet stone pathway. I approached my waiting Maybach, where my driver held the door open for me. As I slid into the luxurious leather seat, I glanced out the tinted window. Preston was standing by the grave, looking thoroughly pleased with himself. He puffed out his chest, believing his intimidation tactic had worked flawlessly. He genuinely thought he had just terrified a helpless, grieving widow into submission. He had absolutely no idea that he had just handed me the keys to his own destruction. The drive back from the cemetery took less than 20 minutes, but that was apparently all the time my stepchildren needed. As my driver navigated the Maybach through the wrought iron gates of my Buckhead estate, I did not find the quiet, empty sanctuary I had left that morning. Instead, I found a spectacle. My vintage leather suitcases, the ones I had owned long before I ever met Marcus, were carelessly tossed onto the wet, manicured grass. Beside them sat cheap black trash bags bursting with my personal files books and the modest clothes I used to wear when I was just a junior accountant, grinding out 80-hour weeks. Standing on the grand marble steps of the French colonial mansion were Marcus Jr. and Chloe. They were sheltering under the massive portico, watching a hired locksmith drill straight through the custom brass lock of my front door. Two private security guards built like linebackers stood flanking the entrance. Preston had threatened me with 48 hours. Apparently, Chloe and Marcus Jr. were too greedy and too arrogant to even wait that long. The moment their father was 6 feet under, they sprinted back to claim their prize. I told my driver to stay in the car. I stepped out into the light drizzle, smoothing the front of my silk dress, and walked up the sweeping stone pathway with absolute precision. I did not run. I did not shout. I approached them with the steady, calculated pace of a predator assessing a very foolish prey. Chloe spotted me first. She tossed her perfect silk press over her shoulder and crossed her arms. Her designer morning dress was impeccably tailored, but the ugly sneer on her face completely ruined the elegant look she was trying to project. "Look who decided to show up," she called out, her voice echoing across the sprawling courtyard. "Do not bother looking for your keys, Nia. The locks are already changed. I told the guards to pack up your things, but honestly, it was hard to tell the difference between your wardrobe and actual garbage." I stopped at the base of the marble steps, letting my gaze sweep over the scattered bags on the wet grass. "I kept the Chanel and the Hermes pieces," she continued, waving a dismissive hand. "My father paid for those, so they belong to the Sterling estate. You can take the cheap polyester rags you brought into this marriage and go back to whatever cramped apartment you came from. Consider it a favor that I even let you keep those." Marcus Jr. stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with his sister. At 38, he was a spitting image of his father, but possessed absolutely none of the older man's business acumen or charm. He had spent his entire life coasting on the Sterling name, furious that his father trusted a forensic accountant with the company books instead of his own flesh and blood. "You heard my sister," Marcus Jr. said, his voice hard and uncompromising. "The free ride is over. For 5 years we had to sit at dinner tables and pretend to respect you. We had to watch our father parade you around Atlanta like you were some brilliant executive when we all knew exactly what you were. A glorified calculator who got lucky." I looked at Marcus Jr., keeping my expression completely neutral. I had spent countless nights untangling the disastrous financial webs he had spun in the company, hiding his massive offshore blunders from the board of directors. I was the one who scrubbed the ledgers clean when he almost bankrupted a subsidiary just to fund his lavish lifestyle. Yet here he was, puffing his chest out and calling me a glorified calculator. "You have absolutely no right to stand on that porch, Marcus Jr., I said, my voice low and dangerously calm. "I have every right," he spat back, stepping down one stair to tower over me. "This is the Sterling family home. We are the Sterling bloodline. You are just a mistake our father made in his old age, a temporary distraction. Did you really think you could outsmart us? Did you genuinely believe you would get to keep this mansion while we settled for the leftovers?" Chloe let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "She really thought she was one of us, Marcus. She put on the designer gowns and attended the charity galas and actually believed she was a Sterling. But you cannot buy class, Nia, and you certainly cannot inherit it. You are exactly what you were the day you walked in here. A nobody trying to climb the social ladder. Now pick up your trash and get off our property before I have my guards physically remove you." The hypocrisy was astounding. Chloe was a woman who had never worked a single day in her life. She spent her days draining her trust fund on luxury shopping sprees and funding Preston's failed political campaigns. Yet she had the audacity to lecture me about class and hard work. They stood there shoulder to shoulder looking down at me from the marble steps. They felt so powerful. They had shed the polite masks they had worn for 5 years, finally unleashing the toxic classist undertones they had harbored since day one. They thought because I came from a working-class background and built my wealth through grueling corporate accounting rather than a trust fund that I was weak. They mistook my professional composure for submission. I looked at the locksmith who was packing up his tools, oblivious to the family warfare happening right behind him. Then I looked at the 2 security guards who were eyeing me with cautious hostility. Finally, I looked back at Chloe and Marcus Jr. They were expecting me to break down. They wanted tears. They wanted a screaming match on the front lawn so they could point and call me crazy. Instead, I simply reached into my black leather handbag. I did not pull out a tissue to wipe my eyes. I did not retrieve the fake keys they thought I still needed. I pulled out my cell phone. "Are you calling a cab?" Chloe mocked, stepping closer to the edge of the porch. "Because Uber Black might be a little out of your price range now." I did not answer her. I dialed a number I knew by heart and pressed the phone to my ear, maintaining unbroken eye contact with my stepchildren. My heart was not racing with fear. It was beating with the steady, rhythmic anticipation of absolute victory. They had crossed the line, and now I was going to make them pay for every single insult they had just thrown at me. "Yes, I need emergency dispatch to my residence in Buckhead," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the steady drizzle. "I have hostile individuals trespassing on my private property. They have brought unauthorized private security and a locksmith to break into my home. I need officers here immediately." I gave the address and ended the call, slipping the phone back into my bag. Chloe threw her head back and let out a sharp, grating laugh. "She actually called the police, Marcus. She is calling the cops to kick the Sterling family out of the Sterling mansion. This is beyond pathetic." Marcus Jr. shook his head in mock pity. "Let her waste their time, Chloe. When the police get here, they can be the ones to physically drag her down the driveway. It will save our guards the trouble of getting their hands dirty." At that exact moment, a silver Porsche Panamera roared through the open wrought iron gates. The car jerked to a halt on the circular driveway, and Preston stepped out. He smoothed the lapels of his expensive tailored suit and strolled over to join his wife and brother-in-law. He looked incredibly satisfied, completely unaware that he had just arrived in time for his own public humiliation. "I see the gold digger is still refusing to vacate the premises," Preston said, joining the line of antagonists on my marble steps. "I warned you at the cemetery, Nia. The free ride is over." I did not respond. I simply stood my ground in the rain, waiting. We did not have to wait long. Within 10 minutes, the piercing wail of sirens cut through the quiet exclusivity of the Buckhead neighborhood. 3 Atlanta police cruisers turned onto the estate, their red and blue emergency lights reflecting off the wet pavement and illuminating the grand facade of the mansion. The heavy doors of the cruisers opened and 4 officers stepped out, assessing the situation. Marcus Jr. immediately marched down the steps to meet them, wearing his ultimate aura of entitlement. He extended a hand toward the lead officer, projecting the false authority he had relied on his entire life. "Officers, thank you for arriving so quickly," Marcus Jr. said smoothly. "I am Marcus Sterling Jr. Our father, Marcus Sr., just passed away, and we are here to secure the family estate. This woman is his widow, but she has no ownership rights to this house. She is trespassing and refusing to leave. We need her escorted off the premises immediately." Preston chimed in from the porch, standing tall and using his most authoritative tone. "We have private security here to handle her belongings, but she is becoming hostile. Please remove her so we can change the locks and secure the family assets." The lead officer looked at Marcus Jr. and then turned his attention to me. "Ma'am, is this true?" he asked. "Do you have any legal right to be on this property?" I did not raise my voice. I did not flinch. I calmly unclasped my black leather handbag and pulled out a thick, crisp manila folder that I had prepared exactly for this moment. I walked past Marcus Jr., completely ignoring his presence, and handed the open folder directly to the lead officer. "Officers, my name is Nia Sterling. I said, my tone perfectly measured. I am the sole and absolute owner of this property. 5 years ago, my late husband and I restructured our personal assets. He legally transferred the deed of this entire estate into a private holding company called NS Holdings LLC. I am the sole managing member and 100% equity owner of that entity. I pointed a manicured finger at the documents in the officer's hands. As you can see by the deed, the certified property tax records, and the LLC registration documents, this house is not part of the Sterling Corporate Trust. It is not part of his probate estate. It is my private property. These three individuals are trespassing, and they are attempting to break and enter. Marcus Jr. let out a scoff of disbelief. That is impossible. My father would never give a multi-million-dollar estate to a temporary wife. Those papers are fake. The officer ignored him, carefully reviewing the notarized seals, the state watermarks, and the clear legal language on the deed. The documents were flawless because I was a forensic accountant who never left a single loose end. The officer handed the folder back to me with a respectful nod. "Everything here is in order, ma'am," the officer said. He then turned around and faced Marcus Jr., Chloe, and Preston. The deference was completely gone from his voice, replaced by the stern authority of the law. "You three have no legal right to be on this property. You need to instruct your locksmith and your security guards to pack up their equipment and leave immediately. If you do not vacate the premises within the next 2 minutes, you will all be arrested for trespassing and attempted burglary." The silence that fell over the courtyard was absolute. Chloe's jaw dropped open. Her perfectly applied makeup suddenly looked harsh against her pale skin. "What are you talking about?" she shrieked, her voice pitching upward in panic. "That is my father's house. You cannot kick us out." "It is my house, Chloe," I corrected her softly. "And you are officially loitering." Preston's face turned a violent shade of red. He stormed down the stairs, pointing a finger at the officer. "Do you know who I am? I am a prominent figure in this city. I play golf with the police chief. You cannot embarrass us like this." The officer placed a hand squarely on his utility belt, looking Preston dead in the eye. "Sir, I do not care who you play golf with. Property law in Georgia is absolute. You have 1 minute left before I pull out my handcuffs. Now move." The hired locksmith did not wait to be told twice. He grabbed his drill and sprinted toward his van. The two private security guards, realizing they were participating in an illegal break-in, immediately backed away and hurried off the property, leaving the three heirs completely defenseless. Several of my wealthy neighbors had stepped out onto their balconies, drawn by the flashing police lights. They were watching the prestigious Sterling children being publicly humiliated on the very driveway they thought they owned. Marcus Jr. looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and pure, unadulterated hatred. He realized in that moment that he had deeply underestimated the woman he called a glorified calculator. "Pick up your trash, Chloe," I said, gesturing to the cheap bags they had thrown on my lawn, "and get off my grass." Trembling with rage and absolute humiliation, Chloe grabbed Preston's arm. The three of them were forced to turn around and endure the walk of shame down the long, sweeping driveway while the police officers watched their every step. They had tried to throw me out into the rain, but instead they were the ones being escorted off the premises like common criminals. The rain began to fall harder, washing over the pristine driveway, as the three of them were forced to march toward the heavy iron gates. The flashing blue and red lights from the police cruisers cast long, distorted shadows across the lawn. Chloe was slipping on the wet pavement. Her expensive designer heels were never meant for a forced march in the rain, and she stumbled, clutching desperately at her husband's arm to keep from falling into the puddles. Marcus Jr. walked with his head down, his fists clenched so tightly at his sides that his knuckles were stark white. He could feel the eyes of the entire Buckhead neighborhood burning into his back, but Preston could not let it go. His fragile ego had just been shattered by a woman he had spent years treating like the hired help. He was a man accustomed to snapping his fingers and watching the world bend to his will. Being escorted off a property by the Atlanta police was a humiliation his pride simply could not process. Just as they reached the edge of the estate where the police officers stood ready to ensure they actually left the premises, Preston stopped abruptly. He spun around, shaking off Chloe's grip. The lead officer stepped forward, warning him to keep moving, but Preston ignored the command. He stood at the boundary line of my property, the rain soaking through his custom-tailored suit, and glared up at me standing dry and perfectly composed under the grand portico. "You think you have won?" Preston screamed, his voice echoing through the damp night air. "You think keeping this house means you beat us? You are nothing but a pathetic gold digger holding onto a sinking ship." I did not move a single muscle. I stood there with my hands clasped in front of me, watching his meltdown with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a desperate rat in a maze. My silence only infuriated him more. "Enjoy your empty mansion tonight," Nia, Preston shouted, jabbing a finger in my direction. "Because this is the absolute peak of your miserable life. You might have found a legal loophole for the house, but you cannot touch the corporate trust. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp, we are reading the final will at the attorney's office. Do you hear me? Tomorrow we take the actual empire." Chloe, emboldened by her husband's rage, turned around and joined in. Her makeup was running down her face in dark streaks, but she pointed at me with pure venom. "You will not be able to afford the property taxes on this place for a single month once we cut off your access to the family accounts. We are freezing every credit card and every bank account attached to the Sterling name. You will be begging us for a buyout by Friday." Marcus Jr. nodded, his face twisted in a bitter sneer. "Sterling Holdings is worth $500 million, he yelled. "The logistics supply chain, the commercial real estate portfolios, the entire development division. It all goes to the bloodline. My father would never leave the actual business to a second wife. We are taking the CEO seat, and the board is already on our side. I am going to personally ensure you are blacklisted from every corporate accounting firm in the state of Georgia. You will never work in this city again." The police officer finally had enough. He grabbed Preston by the arm and forcefully directed him toward his illegally parked Porsche Panamera. "Sir, you need to get in your vehicle and vacate the area immediately, or you will be spending the night in a holding cell." Preston yanked his arm away, but he knew he had lost this battle. He opened the car door, but looked back at me one last time. His eyes were wide with a manic, greedy anticipation. "Enjoy your last night of luxury!" Preston shouted, his voice cracking with rage. "Tomorrow morning we take Sterling Holdings. We are taking the entire empire, and you are going to walk out of that boardroom with absolutely nothing. You are finished, Nia." I stood perfectly still and watched them scramble into the sports car. The engine roared to life, tires screeching against the wet asphalt as they sped away into the dark Atlanta night, followed closely by the police cruisers. The flashing lights faded, and the heavy wrought iron gates slowly swung shut, locking with a heavy and satisfying metallic thud. The estate was finally quiet. The only sound left was the steady rhythm of the rain falling on the courtyard. I turned around and walked back through the massive front doors into the warm, quiet sanctuary of my home. I walked straight to the mahogany bar in the study and poured myself a neat glass of vintage bourbon. I took a slow sip, feeling the familiar burn slide down my throat. I looked up at the large oil-painted portrait of Marcus Sr. hanging above the fireplace. He looked distinguished and commanding in the painting, exactly the way he had run his business. "They want the empire," I said softly to the empty room, raising my glass to my late husband. "They want the entire company, just like we knew they would." A slow, calculated smile spread across my face. Preston and Marcus Jr. thought tomorrow would be my execution. They thought the reading of the will would strip me of my power and leave me destitute. They were completely blinded by their own greed, convinced that Sterling Holdings was the ultimate prize. They had no idea what was actually waiting for them in that boardroom tomorrow morning. They wanted the empire, and I was going to give them exactly what they asked for. Every single toxic, debt-ridden inch of it. The morning sun reflected blindingly off the glass facade of the Sterling Holdings Tower in downtown Atlanta. I stepped out of my car, adjusting the cuffs of my tailored white blazer. My attorney Desmond walked in step beside me. He was a shark in the courtroom, but this morning he looked genuinely anxious. He kept adjusting his tie, muttering about emergency injunctions and probate law. I told him to breathe. Today was not about fighting. Today was about letting the wolves lock themselves inside the cage. We bypassed the reception desk and took the private executive elevator up to the top floor. When the polished steel doors slid open, the tension in the penthouse lobby was thick enough to cut with a knife. Whispers died instantly as I walked down the hall toward the main boardroom. I pushed open the heavy double doors. The room was already packed. The entire board of directors was seated along the massive mahogany table. And there, sitting right at the head of the table in the oversized leather chair that still bore the imprint of my late husband, was Marcus Jr. He was leaning back with his feet propped up on the polished wood, looking like a child playing dress-up in his father's clothes. Chloe and Preston sat immediately to his right. Preston was reviewing a stack of documents with a self-satisfied grin, while Chloe was busy checking her reflection in her phone screen. "You are late," Marcus Jr. announced, dropping his feet to the floor and sitting forward. He did not bother to hide the sheer arrogance radiating from his voice. "Though to be completely honest, your attendance was not actually required. We just wanted you here to witness the changing of the guard." Desmond stepped forward, his voice booming with legal authority. "My client is a senior executive and the widow of the founder. She has every right to be at this table. In fact, this emergency meeting violates at least 3 corporate bylaws." "Take a breath," Counselor Preston interrupted, leaning back and steepling his fingers. "We had an emergency vote at 8 o'clock this morning. The board unanimously recognized Marcus Jr. as the interim chief executive officer of Sterling Holdings. It seems the shareholders prefer a blood relative at the helm rather than a glorified bookkeeper who married into the name." I looked around the table. The older board members, men who had shaken my hand and praised my financial restructuring plans just months ago, now refused to meet my eyes. They were cowards. They had been promised massive dividends by Marcus Jr., and they were eager to secure their own pockets. They thought betting on the sun was the safe play. "As interim CEO, my first official order of business is cleaning house," Marcus Jr. declared, slamming a hand flat against the table. "The days of you snooping through our financial records are over, Nia. We are officially revoking your security clearance. You are banned from accessing any corporate servers, any financial ledgers, and any subsidiary accounts." Chloe chimed in, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "You should really focus on packing your bags, Nia. Corporate accounting is a big boys' game anyway. We hired a real firm to handle the books from now on. You do not need to hurt your pretty little head with the numbers anymore." They were so proud of themselves. They genuinely believed they were executing a masterful corporate coup. By locking me out of the system, they thought they were cutting off my power. They had no idea that locking me out was the exact legal protection I needed to wash my hands of the radioactive disaster this company was about to become. If I had no access, I had no liability. They were literally building my legal defense for me. Desmond turned red with fury. He opened his briefcase, ready to slam them with a dozen legal threats. "This is a targeted hostile takeover," he started. "We will tie this company up in litigation for the next decade." I raised a single hand, instantly silencing my lawyer. Desmond stopped mid-sentence, looking at me in confusion. I did not shout. I did not argue for my rightful place at the table. I simply walked forward, my heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor, until I stood directly across from Marcus Jr. I looked down at him sitting in that massive chair. He tried to maintain a tough facade, but I saw the slight tremor in his jaw. He was terrified of me. He always had been. "Congratulations on your promotion, Marcus," I said, my voice perfectly smooth, holding zero trace of anger. "Running a $500 million empire is a tremendous responsibility. I am sure your deep, extensive experience in crashing startup companies will serve you well here." Preston stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "You are done here, Nia. Security is waiting in the lobby to escort you out of the building. Hand over your corporate badge and leave." I calmly unclipped my security badge and dropped it onto the table. Then I reached into my pocket. The room went dead silent as I pulled out a sleek red encrypted USB drive. I held it up, letting the overhead lights catch the metal casing before I placed it deliberately on the mahogany table right next to my badge. "What is that?" Marcus Jr. demanded, his eyes darting to the drive. "Just a parting gift," I replied, keeping my eyes locked on his. That drive contains the most recent encrypted audit of the Horizon offshore accounts. I highly recommend your new real accounting firm takes a very close look at the third quarter liabilities. Numbers tell a story, Marcus, and the story on that drive is an absolute thriller. Preston narrowed his eyes, suspicious of my calm demeanor. What kind of game are you playing? No games, Preston. I smiled thinly. I am just a bookkeeper leaving my final report. Sterling Holdings is entirely yours now. Every single asset and every single hidden debt. Wear the crown proudly, gentlemen. Just make sure it does not snap your neck. Without waiting for a response, I turned on my heel and walked toward the double doors. Desmond scrambled to pack his briefcase and followed me out. The heavy doors swung shut behind us, leaving the new kings of Sterling Holdings staring at a small red USB drive, completely unaware that it was a ticking time bomb. The heavy doors of the executive elevator slid shut, cutting off the view of the penthouse lobby. The descent to the ground floor felt like dropping down a gravity shaft. My attorney Desmond gripped his leather briefcase so tightly his knuckles turned stark white. He did not speak a single word until we were safely inside the Maybach and cruising down Peachtree Street toward his private law office in Midtown Atlanta. Once we were secured behind the soundproof glass doors of his corner suite, Desmond exploded. He threw his briefcase onto the Italian leather sofa and marched straight to his wet bar. He poured 2 fingers of aged scotch and downed it in one swallow before turning to glare at me. "I cannot believe you just surrendered," he shouted, his voice echoing off the floor to ceiling windows. "You walked into that boardroom and handed them the keys to a $500 million empire on a silver platter. They locked you out of the servers, Naya. They stripped your security clearance. You gave them absolutely everything without a single fight." I took a seat in a velvet wingback chair, crossing my legs elegantly. I declined the drink he offered. "I gave them exactly what they deserved, Desmond. There is a very distinct difference." He slammed his glass down on the marble counter. "No, you gave up. I have known you for 7 years. You are the most ruthless forensic accountant in the American South. Corporate titans hire you at $1,000 an hour to dismantle financial fraud and hunt down missing millions. You do not just roll over for a pair of entitled trust fund babies playing dress-up. Have you forgotten how you even met Marcus Sr.? I kept my gaze perfectly level. I have not forgotten a single detail. Then act like it, Desmond pleaded, stepping closer and resting his hands on the back of his desk chair. 6 years ago, Marcus Jr. and Preston almost drove Sterling Holdings straight into a federal indictment. They took $70 million of company capital and gambled it on an unregulated offshore cryptocurrency scheme. They created fake vendor invoices to cover their tracks. It was sloppy. It was arrogant. It was a guaranteed 20-year prison sentence for both of them. I remember I said, my voice soft but razor sharp. Marcus Sr. hired me quietly to clean up the blood. He begged me to untangle the mess before the Securities and Exchange Commission caught wind of the missing capital. Exactly, Desmond emphasized, pointing a finger at me. You spent 8 months buried in those ledgers. You hunted down every hidden asset, restructured the debt, and built legal firewalls that saved this entire family from absolute ruin. You saved Marcus Jr. from a federal penitentiary. That is why Marcus Sr. fell in love with you. He finally met a woman who possessed the intellect and the spine that his own children completely lacked. You built the modern framework of this empire, Nia. And today you just let them kick you out of the building. I uncrossed my legs and leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Do you honestly think I stopped auditing this company just because I married the founder? Desmond stopped talking. The anger slowly drained from his face, replaced by a sudden, intense curiosity. He slowly lowered himself into his desk chair. What are you saying? I am saying that Marcus Jr. and Preston never actually learned their lesson, I explained, intertwining my fingers. The moment my husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer last year, those 2 idiots thought nobody was watching the vault. They sneaked right back into the exact same offshore gambling habits. Only this time they went much bigger. They resurrected the Horizon shell companies. Desmond swallowed hard. The Horizon accounts, the ones you mentioned on that red USB drive. Yes, I confirmed. While my husband was dying in a hospital bed, his son and his son-in-law secretly leveraged the core assets of Sterling Holdings. They used the company as collateral to borrow a massive sum of money for an illegal offshore investment. They thought they were financial geniuses. They thought they could double the money, pay back the loan, and pocket the profits before my husband passed away. Did they? Desmond asked, his voice barely a whisper. They lost every single dime, I said, a cold smile creeping onto my face. The market crashed. The offshore partners vanished. The money is completely gone. And the creditors are coming to collect. Desmond leaned back in his chair, staring at me as the magnitude of the situation finally clicked into place in his sharp legal mind. That red USB drive you left on the table. It contains the unscrubbed raw data, I replied. It is the exact digital trail of their recent fraud. I left it there to let them know that their secret is not actually a secret. They are sitting on a ticking time bomb. By locking me out of the corporate servers today, they officially took sole possession of the company and all its hidden liabilities. I am no longer legally responsible for the catastrophe they just inherited. Desmond let out a low whistle, dragging a hand across his face. You set them up. You let them steal a burning building. I let them claim the throne, I corrected him gently. A throne that is currently sitting on top of an active landmine. Suddenly, Desmond's desk phone buzzed loudly. He glanced down at the flashing screen, and his expression immediately hardened. The lingering awe in his eyes vanished, replaced by sheer panic. He picked up the receiver and listened for 10 seconds before hanging up forcefully. Nia, we have a massive problem, Desmond said, standing up abruptly. Preston is not waiting for the ink to dry. He just made his next move. I raised an eyebrow, remaining perfectly still. What did he do? Desmond grabbed his suit jacket from the back of the chair. He used his new authority as a board member to freeze your personal bank accounts, all of them. He also canceled your private credit lines. They just sent a formal notice. They are trying to financially suffocate you before the sun goes down. I remained perfectly seated in the velvet chair, watching Desmond pace frantically across the Persian rug. My cell phone vibrated on the glass coffee table. The screen lit up with a rapid succession of automated text messages from my private wealth management group. Account frozen pending corporate review. Credit line suspended. Asset transfer blocked. They had executed a complete financial blackout in less than 20 minutes. Desmond was already dialing his litigation team, barking orders to draft emergency injunctions against the Sterling board. He paced back and forth, threatening to sue them for breach of fiduciary duty and malicious financial tampering. Put the phone down, Desmond, I said. He stopped mid-stride, staring at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. Nia, they just cut off your oxygen. Every checking account, every investment portfolio, every black card tied to the Sterling corporate ecosystem is officially locked. They want you starving in the streets by midnight. We have to file a motion before the courts close today. I picked up my phone and silenced the incoming bank alerts. I told you to put the phone down. Let them have their moment of triumph. Before Desmond could argue, my phone buzzed again. This time it was an incoming call. The caller ID displayed the main executive line for Sterling Holdings. Marcus Jr. was calling from the very office I had just vacated. I answered the call and placed it on speakerphone, setting the device gently on the coffee table so Desmond could hear every single word. Having a little trouble with your wallet today? Nia, Marcus Jr. asked. His voice dripped with arrogant satisfaction. I heard a muffled giggle in the background. Chloe was clearly listening in on the executive speakerphone. I leaned back and crossed my arms. You are moving remarkably fast, Marcus. I would almost be impressed if I did not know this was entirely Preston's idea. You never had the strategic capacity to execute a corporate freeze this quickly. The line went silent for a brief second. I had hit a nerve, but Marcus Jr. quickly recovered, masking his wounded pride with loud bravado. It does not matter whose idea it was, he snapped. What matters is that you currently have zero liquidity. We completely severed your access to the Sterling family office. Your platinum cards are dead plastic. Your checking accounts are locked down by our legal department pending a full audit of your spending. You cannot book a flight out of Atlanta. You cannot even buy a cup of coffee without my direct authorization. Chloe chimed in, her voice shrill and dripping with venom. The locks on the Buckhead mansion are next, Nia. You might have waved a piece of paper at the police yesterday, but we have the entire legal team of Sterling Holdings filing an emergency dispute on the deed. Without money to pay your own attorneys, you are entirely defenseless. It is over. You are broke. I kept my breathing steady, maintaining the absolute silence of a seasoned predator. I wanted them to think I was panicking. I wanted them to interpret my quietness as sheer terror. In reality, I was mentally calculating the exact coordinates of the trap they were walking blindly into. You two are incredibly bold, I finally said, letting a tiny, deliberate trace of uncertainty slip into my voice. Freezing personal accounts without a court order is highly illegal. You are abusing your newfound authority. Sue us, then! Marcus Jr. mocked, laughing loudly into the receiver. Oh, wait, you cannot afford a lawyer. Let me explain how the new world works, Nia. You are completely cornered. You have no money, no power, and no allies in this city. Every friend you thought you had in the Atlanta elite will drop your calls the moment they realize your bank accounts are empty. You are going to be begging us for a handout by tomorrow morning. What do you want, Marcus? I asked, keeping my voice carefully constrained. That is exactly what I wanted to hear, he gloated. We are offering you a one-time exit strategy, a mercy deal. Our legal team is drafting a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement and a total relinquishment of rights. You sign away any and all claims to the Sterling estate. You agree to walk away quietly and never speak to the press, the shareholders, or the police. And in exchange, I prompted. In exchange, we will unfreeze exactly one account, Chloe answered greedily. We will give you a single cash payment to start a new life somewhere far away from Georgia. A severance package for your services as our father's temporary companion. But you have to beg for it, Nia. You have to come back to the boardroom tomorrow, look us in the eye, and sign everything over. If I refuse, I asked. Marcus Jr. let out a dark, triumphant chuckle. If you refuse, we will bury you in so much litigation you will spend the rest of your life buried in debt. We will strip the Buckhead house from you and leave you bankrupt in the gutter. See you tomorrow morning, Nia. Do not be late. The line clicked dead. Desmond stared at the phone on the coffee table, his face pale with shock and outrage. They are trying to starve you into submission, he whispered. They want to humiliate you in front of their lawyers tomorrow before throwing you out with pennies. I picked up my phone and calmly slid it back into my designer bag. I stood up, smoothing the imaginary wrinkles from my white blazer. They are begging me to sign the very documents that will transfer the entire legal burden of their offshore fraud directly onto their own shoulders, I said, walking toward Desmond's office door. They are doing all the heavy lifting for us. Call their legal team, Desmond. Tell them I am thoroughly terrified. Tell them I will sign whatever they want. Desmond froze, staring at me as if I had suddenly lost my mind. The command contradicted every aggressive legal strategy we had built over the years. Before he could voice the dozen objections clearly forming in his head, a sharp knock echoed through his office suite. His paralegal opened the heavy oak door, stepping inside with a thick sealed envelope bearing the distinct gold-embossed logo of Preston's corporate legal counsel. They sent a courier, the paralegal announced, placing the package directly on Desmond's desk. The courier demanded a signature of receipt. They said it was highly urgent and required an immediate response. Desmond waved the paralegal away and snatched the envelope from the desk. He ripped it open with unnecessary force, pulling out a stack of dense legal documents. His eyes darted across the pages, absorbing the harsh legal jargon. As he read, his face flushed a deep shade of crimson, and the veins in his neck became visibly pronounced. He slammed the entire stack of papers down onto the marble surface with a resounding crack. "This is an absolute insult," Desmond roared, his voice vibrating with pure indignation. "It is not just an insult, Nia, it is a legal execution." They had this drafted days ago. They were planning this corporate slaughter, while Marcus Sr. was still breathing in his hospital bed. I walked over to the desk and picked up the first few pages. The sheer audacity of the document was impressive in its own twisted way. Preston and Marcus Jr. had hired a ruthless team of corporate sharks to draft a relentless, suffocating surrender agreement. The terms were draconian, leaving absolutely zero room for negotiation. "Read the settlement clause," Desmond demanded, pointing a shaking finger at the third page. "Look at what they think your life is worth." I scanned the text, finding the exact paragraph he was pointing at. In exchange for the complete relinquishment of all equity shares, voting rights board seats, and future claims against the Sterling Corporate Trust, the holding company would release a one-time severance payment of exactly $1 million. Furthermore, the agreement demanded an ironclad non-disclosure agreement prohibiting me from ever discussing the family, the business, or the offshore accounts with anyone, including federal authorities. They want to buy your silence for $1 million. Desmond paced the length of his office, his energy completely frantic. Sterling Holdings generates that much revenue in a single afternoon. They are offering you pocket change to walk away from a $500 million empire. And if you refuse, they have included a clause threatening to tie your personal assets up in probate court for the next 20 years. They want to bankrupt you with legal fees until you are forced to settle for pennies. I placed the documents back on the desk, aligning the edges perfectly. The pristine white paper felt heavy with their malicious intent. They genuinely believed they had backed me into a corner where my only options were starvation or submission. I am not letting them get away with this, Desmond declared, marching over to his filing cabinet and yanking open a drawer. He began pulling out thick legal volumes and blank legal pads, throwing them onto his workspace. We are going to launch a massive counterattack. I will file an emergency injunction to halt their interim CEO appointment. I will draft a lawsuit for malicious financial tampering and breach of fiduciary duty. We can freeze the company assets, just like they froze yours. We will drag Preston and Marcus Jr. into a prolonged discovery process and force them to open their books to a federal judge. I am going to make them bleed for this. He was practically vibrating with righteous fury, ready to burn the city down to protect my interests. Desmond was a phenomenal lawyer, an aggressive litigator who despised bullies, but he was reacting with pure emotion. He was looking at the board like a traditional lawyer trying to win a standard battle over corporate control. He did not see the hidden trapdoor waiting right beneath our feet. I watched him frantically scribbling notes on his legal pad, preparing to wage a war that I had absolutely no intention of fighting. If Desmond filed those injunctions, he would accidentally stop Preston and Marcus Jr. from taking full possession of the company. A legal freeze would prevent them from assuming total liability. By trying to protect me, Desmond would unknowingly save my stepchildren from their own catastrophic mistakes. I walked over to him and placed my hand firmly over his moving pen, pressing it down against the yellow paper. Desmond stopped writing and looked up at me, his chest heaving with exertion. I need you to listen to me very carefully, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. We are not filing a single injunction. We are not countersuing for breach of fiduciary duty. We are not doing anything that would delay or block their absolute takeover of Sterling Holdings. Desmond stared at me, his frustration boiling over. Nia, they are robbing you blind in broad daylight. They are offering you $1 million to abandon your entire life. You cannot seriously tell me to just sit here and let them finalize this robbery. I am your attorney. It is my job to protect your assets and destroy anyone who tries to take them from you. If we do not fight back right now, they win. I maintained my grip on his hand, refusing to let him resume his frantic note-taking. I met his desperate gaze with a look of absolute, unshakable certainty. I needed him to stop thinking like a defensive lawyer and start thinking like a forensic accountant holding a winning lottery ticket. They are not robbing me. Desmond, I stated clearly, stripping away all the panic from the room. They are desperately begging to assume a massive toxic financial crater that they created with their own hands. That $1 million offer is not a settlement. It is the bait. And we are going to let them swallow it whole. Desmond slowly withdrew his hand from under mine. He sank back into his leather executive chair. The frantic, aggressive energy that had consumed him just moments ago evaporated completely. He looked at me with a mixture of apprehension and dawning realization. He was a brilliant lawyer, but he was accustomed to fighting bloody battles in courtrooms. I was a forensic accountant, and I fought my battles silently on spreadsheets where the math never lied. You want to give them the company? He asked. His voice was completely flat now, stripped of its previous self-righteous rage. You want to sign their relinquishment agreement and take the $1 million they are offering. I walked over to his wet bar and finally poured myself a glass of sparkling water. I took a slow, deliberate sip before turning back to face him. I do not want their $1 million, Desmond. I am going to let them keep every single penny of that insulting severance package. I want you to draft a response to their legal team right now. Tell them I am too terrified of their litigation threats to fight back. Tell them I am thoroughly intimidated by Marcus Jr. and Preston. Tell them I will sign over 100% of my equity, my voting rights, and my board seats. Tell them I will walk away completely empty-handed just to escape their wrath. Desmond stared at me. He picked up his heavy gold pen and tapped it rhythmically against the polished mahogany desk. His sharp legal mind was racing, catching up to my financial strategy. If you sign away all your rights, you also sign away all your liabilities, he murmured, piecing the puzzle together piece by piece. If you accept a buyout, they could legally drag you back into the mess later, claiming you profited from fraudulent assets. But if you walk away with nothing, you are entirely severed from the entity. If Sterling Holdings collapses tomorrow, you are completely insulated. You walk away with zero legal exposure. Exactly, I smiled. A genuine, calculated smile that reached all the way to my eyes. Preston and Marcus Jr. are so blinded by their own greed and their desperate need to humiliate me that they are not looking at the actual numbers. They think they are stealing a golden goose. They have absolutely no idea that the goose is infected with a fatal disease they engineered themselves. The Horizon offshore accounts are going to detonate in a matter of days. The federal authorities are already sniffing around the edges of those missing funds. If I fight for control of the company, I will be standing right in the blast zone when the bombs go off. By fighting them, I would be fighting for the privilege of going to federal prison on their behalf. Desmond let out a sharp breath. A wide, predatory grin slowly spread across his face. He finally saw the absolute masterpiece of my design. You are going to let them lock the doors from the inside right before the building burns down to the ground. I am going to hand them the matches, I corrected him gently. I need you to draft the surrender documents, Desmond. Make them look absolutely desperate. Make sure the legal language explicitly states that the new executives assume total and complete responsibility for all current and past and future liabilities of Sterling Holdings. Bury that specific clause deep in the paperwork. Use the most mundane, dense boilerplate text you can possibly find. Make it so incredibly boring that Preston's arrogant corporate lawyers skim right past it in their rush to declare victory over the poor defeated widow. Desmond opened a blank document on his computer, his fingers hovering eagerly over the keyboard. He was practically vibrating with a new kind of energy, the thrilling energy of a man preparing to execute the perfect legal ambush. I can have this drafted and sent over to their team within the hour. I will tell them you were in tears during our meeting. I will say you felt completely outmatched by their superior legal maneuvering, and you just want the nightmare to end. They will eat it up. Their massive egos will not allow them to suspect a trap. They will assume you simply crumbled under the pressure. Let them celebrate their brilliant tactical minds, I said, setting my glass down on the marble counter. Let them buy expensive champagne and slap each other on the back tonight. They desperately want to be the undisputed kings of Atlanta society. We are going to give them the crown, the throne, and the entire collapsing kingdom. I picked up my designer bag and walked toward the heavy oak door. The relentless rain had finally stopped outside, leaving the city sky clear and sharp. Everything was falling perfectly into place, just as my late husband and I had planned. The trap was set, and the prey was practically sprinting toward the bait. Call me when they agree to the meeting, I said, placing my hand on the brass doorknob. Schedule the official signing for tomorrow morning at the courthouse. Make sure it is a very public setting. They will want an audience for my humiliation. And I want to look them dead in the eye when I hand over the keys to their total destruction. Desmond nodded firmly, his eyes already locked on his computer screen as his fingers flew across the keyboard. He was drafting the document that would legally seal their fate. Consider it done, Nia. Tomorrow morning they get exactly what they asked for. The bass from the yacht speakers vibrated through the iPad screen as I sat at the head of my custom dining table. Marcus Jr. had wasted absolutely no time. The moment Desmond sent over the preliminary email indicating my complete surrender, they had rented a massive luxury yacht on Lake Lanier to celebrate their supposed victory. Chloe was holding her phone high in the air, live streaming the entire pathetic spectacle to her thousands of social media followers. She was wearing a sequined cocktail dress that caught the strobe lights, holding a bottle of expensive champagne in her other hand. "We did it, guys," Chloe screamed over the loud music, her words slurred with alcohol and pure arrogance. "The Wicked Witch is officially dead. Well, not dead, but she is definitely broke and running for the hills." Preston stepped into the frame, wrapping his arm around Chloe's waist. He was wearing a crisp linen shirt, unbuttoned halfway down his chest, holding a premium cigar. He looked directly into the camera lens, pointing a mocking finger. "This is a public service announcement for all the gold diggers out there." Preston sneered, his face flushed with triumph. "You can try to infiltrate a legacy family. You can put on the fancy clothes and pretend you belong in our tax bracket. But at the end of the day, the bloodline always wins. The street rat is going back to the gutter where she belongs. Cheers to taking back our empire." Marcus Jr. squeezed his way into the shot, holding up a freshly printed document. It was the letter of intent Desmond had drafted just hours ago. He waved it around like a hard-won trophy. "She folded like a cheap lawn chair," Marcus Jr. boasted, laughing hysterically. $1 million. That is all it took to make the great forensic accountant pack her bags and cry to her lawyer. She signed away her entire life because she was too terrified to fight us in court. Sterling Holdings is ours free and clear. The king is back on the throne. I watched the live stream with absolute utter tranquility. I was not angry. I was not humiliated. I was actually enjoying the show. I took a slow bite of the A5 Wagyu steak my private chef had prepared for me, savoring the melt-in-your-mouth texture and the rich, buttery flavor. The contrast between their chaotic, loud desperation and my silent, refined luxury was almost poetic. They were drinking heavily on a rented boat, trying to convince the internet that they were untouchable billionaires. I was sitting in a fully paid-off Buckhead estate, orchestrating the greatest financial trap in Atlanta history. Chloe grabbed the phone back, flipping the camera to show the sprawling deck of the yacht where several other wealthy heirs and socialites were dancing and drinking. She leaned close to the microphone, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Honestly, we are doing her a favor," Chloe mocked. "Managing a $500 million company is way above her pay grade anyway. She is just a diversity hire my father took pity on. She should take that $1 million and open a nice little nail salon somewhere far away from us." "Good riddance, Nia. Do not let the door hit you on the way out." I picked up my linen napkin and dabbed the corners of my mouth gracefully. I placed the iPad on a silver stand, letting the live stream continue to play in the background. Their racist, classist undertones were fully exposed for the world to see, but I did not care about their petty insults anymore. They were dancing on the deck of the Titanic, and they were blissfully unaware of the massive iceberg looming right in front of them. I opened my sleek silver laptop, which sat perfectly aligned next to my crystal wine glass. I pulled up the encrypted email thread between Desmond and Preston's high-priced corporate attorneys. The final digital copies of the relinquishment agreement were waiting for my official authorization. The documents contained every single trap, every single transfer of liability, and every single fatal financial flaw we had carefully buried in the dense legal jargon. Preston and his lawyers had demanded my explicit written confirmation before they finalized the court date. They wanted absolute proof that I was surrendering unconditionally. They wanted me to admit defeat in writing so they could sleep soundly tonight, believing they had completely outsmarted me. I rested my fingers on the keyboard. I did not type out a long, angry response. I did not try to defend my pride or argue about my contributions to the company. I gave them exactly what their massive, fragile egos demanded. I typed a single short sentence. "I accept the terms of the severance package and formally approve the transfer of all company liabilities and assets to Marcus Jr. and Chloe Sterling." I did not even blink as I moved the cursor over the send button. I took one last sip of my vintage Bordeaux, letting the complex flavors settle on my tongue. I looked back at the iPad screen where Marcus Jr. and Preston were now pouring champagne over the side of the yacht, cheering into the night sky. I smiled softly and pressed send. The email vanished into the digital ether, flying straight into the inbox of their legal team. The final piece of the puzzle had just clicked into place. The bait was officially taken. I closed my laptop with a satisfying snap, cutting off the glowing light of the screen. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the loud, obnoxious laughter still pouring out of my iPad. They thought they were celebrating the beginning of their glorious reign. They had no idea they had just RSVP'd to their own corporate funeral. The heavy brass doors of the most exclusive steakhouse in Buckhead swung open for me 2 evenings later. I had arranged a quiet dinner with Desmond to review the final choreography for our upcoming court appearance. The restaurant was a fortress of old money and dim lighting, featuring velvet booths and a strict dress code. I wore a tailored emerald green sheath dress, projecting absolute control. When I approached the host stand, the general manager looked incredibly uncomfortable. He was a seasoned professional who usually handled billionaires with ease, but tonight he was sweating. He apologized profusely, explaining that my usual private corner booth had been forcibly occupied. He told me that my stepdaughter and her husband had arrived 20 minutes earlier, saw my name on the reservation ledger, and aggressively demanded the table. They threatened to leverage their new position at Sterling Holdings to ruin the restaurant's corporate catering contracts if they were denied. I patted the manager's arm and told him to breathe. I assured him I was not going to shoot the messenger. I simply asked him to lead me to the table. As we approached the secluded alcove, I heard Chloe's shrill voice echoing over the gentle piano music. She was waving a crystal glass, demanding the sommelier bring another bottle of their most expensive vintage champagne. Preston sat opposite her, looking like a king surveying his newly conquered territory. The table was already covered in extravagant dishes: beluga caviar, fresh oysters, and massive Wagyu tomahawk steaks. Chloe spotted me, and her eyes lit up with malicious glee. She genuinely thought she had orchestrated a brilliant tactical humiliation. She leaned back against the velvet cushions, swirling her champagne. "Look who decided to show up," she announced loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "I am sorry, Nia, but the VIP section is strictly for paying customers. Since Marcus locked down all your credit cards yesterday, we figured we would save you the embarrassment of getting your card declined in front of the entire Atlanta elite. You are welcome, by the way." Preston chuckled, slicing into his steak with deliberate slowness. "If you are hungry, Nia, I am sure the kitchen has some leftover bread rolls. You can take them back to whatever motel you are hiding in tonight." I stood there looking at the feast they had ordered. The bill was easily approaching $5,000. They were celebrating wildly, spending money like it was water, completely intoxicated by the illusion of their own power. They expected me to demand my table back. They wanted me to scream at the manager and get dragged out by security. I did not raise my voice. I did not even look at Preston. I turned my attention to the general manager, who was standing nervously a few steps behind me. "What is the current total for this table?" I asked, my voice perfectly calm and measured. The manager blinked, caught off guard by the question. He quickly checked the tablet in his hand. "Currently, madam, with the rare vintages and the caviar, the tab is sitting at $4,800. Chloe scoffed loudly. "Why are you asking about the bill? You could not even afford the appetizers right now. Go home, Nia. The adults are eating." I unclasped my emerald clutch. I did not pull out a credit card that they could track or attempt to freeze. I reached inside and pulled out a thick, crisp stack of $100 bills, tightly bound by a purple bank strap. The visual impact of cold, hard cash in a digital world is always staggering. The dull thud the stack made when I dropped it onto the pristine white tablecloth silenced Chloe instantly. "There is $10,000 in that stack," I told the manager, never taking my eyes off Chloe's suddenly pale face. "Cover their entire bill. Use the remainder as a tip for your exceptional staff. They deserve hazard pay for dealing with unruly children." Preston dropped his steak knife. The sharp clatter of silver against porcelain rang through the quiet alcove. His smug expression vanished completely, replaced by a deep, unsettling confusion. He stared at the stack of cash and then looked up at me. He was trying to process how a woman whose entire financial life had supposedly been destroyed yesterday was casually dropping $10,000 in cash on a dinner she was not even eating. I pulled a sleek gold pen from my clutch. I picked up a pristine white linen napkin from the empty place setting beside Chloe. I took my time deliberately writing a message in bold, dark ink. When I finished, I folded the napkin once and tucked it neatly under the base of Preston's wine glass. "I am not here to fight over a table," I said, my voice low and smooth. "I simply came to check on my investments. Enjoy the most expensive meal of your lives. I highly recommend you chew your food thoroughly. Indigestion is a terrible thing to deal with when you are facing a federal audit." Chloe opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She looked at the money, then at the napkin, and finally at her husband. I turned away from their table without waiting for a response. I signaled to Desmond, who had been watching the entire exchange from the bar. We walked out of the restaurant together, leaving Preston and Chloe sitting in complete silence, surrounded by thousands of dollars worth of food that suddenly tasted like ash. As the heavy brass doors closed behind me, I knew the seed of doubt had been planted. Preston was a snake, and snakes have excellent survival instincts. He knew something was terribly wrong, but he was already locked inside the trap. Preston snatched the linen napkin from beneath his wine glass the moment I was out of sight. His eyes scanned my handwritten message, and all the color drained from his face. The words "federal audit" glared back at him like a neon warning sign. He crumpled the fabric in his fist, his heart suddenly hammering against his ribs. Chloe tried to brush it off, calling it a pathetic bluff, but Preston was not listening. He knew exactly how financial crimes worked. He knew how ruthless federal investigators could be. Most importantly, he knew that I was not a woman who made empty threats. Early the next morning, Preston stormed into the executive suite of Sterling Holdings. He had barely slept. Dark circles framed his eyes, and his usually pristine suit looked slightly rumpled. He bypassed the receptionist and shoved open the frosted glass doors to the CEO office. Marcus Jr. was sitting behind the massive desk, admiring his own nameplate. He was already sipping a morning mimosa, celebrating a victory that had not even been legally finalized. "We need to stop the transfer," Preston demanded, slamming his hands flat on the desk. "We need to delay the signing immediately." Marcus Jr. let out an exasperated sigh, setting his crystal glass down. "Are you still panicking over a piece of restaurant stationery? Chloe texted me about your little panic attack last night." "It is a desperate bluff, Preston. She is just trying to spook us because she knows she has absolutely zero leverage left." Preston shook his head, pacing the length of the expansive office. "You did not see her, Marcus. You did not see the look in her eyes. Women who are facing total bankruptcy do not drop $10,000 in banded cash just to make a point. They do not smile when their entire life is being ripped away." She knew exactly what she was doing. She specifically mentioned a federal audit. What if she found the Horizon accounts? What if she made copies before we locked her out of the servers? The sudden mention of the offshore Horizon accounts made Marcus Jr. twitch, but his towering arrogance quickly swallowed any emerging fear. "It is completely impossible," Marcus Jr. shot back, standing up to assert his authority. "We buried those transactions under 3 separate layers of shell companies. Even if she suspected something, she has absolutely no proof. We revoked her corporate access. We froze her personal wealth. She is a civilian now. Our legal team has drafted a bulletproof relinquishment agreement. Once she signs it, she waives all rights to ever investigate, sue, or audit this company again." "But what if she is letting us take the company for a reason?" Preston pushed, running an anxious hand through his hair. "Think about it." She folded way too easily. She accepted the $1 million severance without a single counteroffer. She is a corporate shark, Marcus. Sharks do not just hand over a $500 million empire because they got a scary letter from a lawyer. She is setting a trap. Marcus Jr. walked around the desk, closing the distance between them. He grabbed Preston by the shoulder, his grip tight and unyielding. "Listen to me very carefully, Marcus." Jr. growled, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "The board is watching us. The shareholders are watching us. If we hesitate now, we look weak. We look like we are scared of a glorified bookkeeper. The moment she signs that paper, Sterling Holdings is ours, free and clear. We get the logistics network. We get the commercial real estate portfolio. We get the operational revenue. We can use the incoming cash flow to quietly patch the holes in the horizon accounts before anyone even notices they are bleeding. Preston opened his mouth to argue, but the sheer magnitude of the prize silenced him. The greed in the room was highly infectious. Sterling Holdings was a golden crown, and it was sitting right there waiting for them to reach out and take it. If they backed down now, they would lose their one and only chance to seize absolute control of the family dynasty. They would be admitting defeat to the very woman they had just publicly humiliated. "We push forward," Marcus Jr. commanded, his voice ringing with absolute finality. "We schedule the official signing for tomorrow morning. We bring our full legal team to the courthouse, and we make her sign every single page. No delays, no second guessing. We take the empire." Preston looked at his brother-in-law. The knot of dread in his stomach twisted tighter violently, warning him that they were walking blindfolded into a minefield. But the allure of the billionaire lifestyle was simply too strong to resist. The promise of unbridled wealth and unlimited power completely overrode his basic survival instincts. "Fine," Preston conceded, his voice dropping to a tense whisper. "Tell the lawyers to finalize the paperwork. We execute the takeover tomorrow." Marcus Jr. grinned, flashing a predatory smile. "That is the spirit. Tomorrow we make history." They turned their attention back to the stunning view of the Atlanta skyline, completely unaware that their frantic greed had just cemented their ultimate downfall. They had chosen to ignore the blaring warning signs. They had willfully dismissed the extreme danger of dealing with a forensic accountant who never left a single loose end. The trap was now fully assembled, and they were the ones eagerly turning the key to lock themselves inside. The conference room at Preston's corporate legal firm was designed to intimidate. It sat on the 60th floor of a glass skyscraper in downtown Atlanta, featuring sharp angles, sterile white walls, and a massive granite table that felt as cold as ice. We sat on one side, my attorney Desmond and I, facing a small army of 5 high-priced corporate litigators. Preston and Marcus Jr. were noticeably absent. They felt themselves far too important to attend a tedious paperwork review, choosing instead to let their attack dogs handle the execution. The lead counsel, a man named Harrison, who wore a custom Italian suit and a perpetual sneer, slid a massive leather-bound binder across the smooth granite surface. It landed in front of me with a heavy, ominous thud. The document was easily over 200 pages long, padded with every conceivable legal threat, restriction, and penalty they could legally muster. Harrison leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table and adjusting his gold-rimmed glasses. He had the condescending smile of a man who got paid $1,000 an hour to ruin lives. "The terms are absolutely non-negotiable," Nia Harrison stated, tapping his manicured index finger against the binder. "You are to surrender 100% of your voting shares, your board seats, and any residual equity in Sterling Holdings. You will vacate your corporate office immediately. Furthermore, you will sign a perpetual non-disclosure agreement. If you ever speak to the press, the shareholders, or any federal entity about this family or this company, we will seize your $1 million severance and sue you into absolute poverty." Harrison did not stop there. He flipped to a specific page and pushed it toward me. "My clients have also included a strict liability waiver regarding your previous accounting work. The contract explicitly states that you take full public responsibility for resigning due to professional inadequacy. You are signing away your reputation." Desmond sprang to his feet, playing his part to absolute perfection. He slammed his hands on the granite table, his voice rising in calculated theatrical outrage. "This is an unconscionable document," Desmond shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at Harrison. "You are stripping my client of her life's work. You are enforcing punitive clauses that border on outright extortion. We will not sign a contract that forces her to publicly humiliate herself and leaves her completely defenseless against future frivolous litigation." The opposing legal team exchanged amused, knowing glances. They were thoroughly enjoying Desmond's performance, completely mistaking his theatrical anger for genuine, helpless desperation. Harrison let out a soft, patronizing chuckle, leaning back in his chair. Your client is in no position to dictate terms, Counselor Harrison said smoothly. She either signs this exact document today to prepare for tomorrow's official execution, or we withdraw the $1 million offer entirely. If she refuses, she walks away with zero cash, and we tie her personal assets up in probate court until she cannot afford to buy groceries. She will be bankrupt before the year is over. Desmond turned to me, his face a mask of perfectly simulated panic. He urged me to fight, listing out the catastrophic consequences of signing the agreement. He argued loudly that the asset relinquishment was too broad, that the gag order was illegal, and that they were practically carrying out a corporate execution. I kept my eyes lowered, staring blankly at the thick binder. I let my shoulders slump just a fraction, projecting the exact image of a broken, exhausted widow who had finally reached her breaking point. I let out a long, shaky breath, ensuring that the 5 lawyers across the table saw exactly what they wanted to see. A defeated woman waving the white flag. "Where do I initial the draft?" I asked, forcing my voice to drop into a hesitant whisper. Harrison's smile widened into a full, predatory grin. He slid a heavy silver pen across the table, every tab marked in red Nia. "And I highly suggest you do not waste our time trying to read every page. The language is standard corporate forfeiture. You are simply giving up." I picked up the pen. My hand trembled slightly, a masterful acting choice, as I flipped open the binder. Desmond let out a loud, frustrated sigh, slumping back into his chair and covering his face with his hands as if he had failed me completely. I began to initial the pages. I did not argue. I did not ask for a single concession. I did not attempt to strike out the cruel, restrictive clauses that barred me from the corporate grounds or demanded my public silence. I flipped past page 50, then page 100. My eyes quickly caught the specific dense block of text buried deep on page 142. It was the exact paragraph Desmond had drafted and slipped into the exchange of documents during the negotiation phase. The extremely boring, highly technical boilerplate clause that explicitly transferred all past, present, and future corporate liabilities, including any unknown offshore debts and pending federal inquiries, entirely to the assuming executive officers, Marcus Jr. and Chloe. Harrison and his team of arrogant corporate sharks had been so laser-focused on inserting their punitive clauses, their gag orders, and their reputation-destroying terms that they had skimmed right over it. They were so obsessed with locking me out of the empire that they did not realize they were locking themselves inside a burning building. I initialed the bottom of page 142 without a single hesitation. I continued flipping and signing until I reached the final page of the draft. I closed the heavy binder and pushed it slowly back across the granite table. Harrison collected the document with a highly satisfied nod, a wise decision he mocked, packing the binder into his expensive leather briefcase. "We will have the finalized copies ready for the official signing at the courthouse tomorrow morning. Do not be late. My clients are very eager to close this chapter." The lawyers stood up, buttoning their suit jackets and chatting amiably among themselves, completely ignoring me and Desmond as they filed out of the conference room. They felt absolutely invincible. They had just secured a $500 million empire for their clients and crushed the opposition without breaking a sweat. Once the heavy glass door clicked shut, sealing us in total privacy, the heavy, defeated atmosphere in the room vanished instantly. Desmond sat up straight, adjusting his tie with a crisp, precise movement. The panicked, frustrated lawyer routine dissolved entirely, replaced by a sharp, calculating glint in his eye. I placed the silver pen down on the table. My slumped posture corrected itself into a rigid, confident line. I looked across the empty room and then turned to Desmond, offering a slow, chilling smile. They had swallowed the bait whole. Tomorrow morning, the trap would officially snap shut. The elevator descent from Harrison's towering glass office was swift and completely silent. Desmond held his rigid professional composure until we reached the private underground parking garage. The moment the heavy armored doors of my Maybach closed and sealed us inside, his furious lawyer facade cracked into a massive, genuine grin. He let out a sharp breath of air, shaking his head in sheer disbelief at the incredible heist we had just pulled off. "I cannot believe they took it," Desmond said, pulling out his phone to check his emails. 5 highly paid corporate litigators sitting in a room, and not a single one of them bothered to read the fine print of page 142. They were so utterly focused on drafting clauses to destroy your reputation that they completely missed the liability transfer. They saw exactly what they wanted to see, I replied, leaning back against the plush leather seat as my driver navigated out of the garage. They saw a grieving widow who was too weak to fight back. When you reduce your opponent to a stereotype, you become completely blind to their actual strategy. By the time we returned to Desmond's Midtown office, the sun was beginning to set over the Atlanta skyline, casting long, dramatic shadows across his marble floors. The city was glowing with evening lights, but the real electricity was pulsing right inside this room. We were standing on the absolute precipice of a corporate earthquake. A sharp ping from Desmond's computer broke the silence. He quickly moved to his desk and opened the incoming message. It was an email from Harrison containing the finalized digital PDF of the relinquishment agreement. The subject line read, "Final draft for tomorrow morning execution." Desmond scrolled rapidly through the massive document, his eyes darting across the paragraphs to verify the text. He stopped scrolling and let out a low whistle of pure satisfaction. "It is perfectly intact, Nia. They did not change a single word. The liability trap is locked into the final print." Before I could respond, the heavy black telephone on Desmond's desk began to ring. The caller ID displayed Harrison's private firm number. Desmond and I exchanged a quick, knowing look. The opposing side was getting anxious. They had the initial draft, but their massive, fragile egos required one final victory lap before they could sleep tonight. Desmond hit the speakerphone button and answered with a heavy, exhausted sigh, perfectly slipping back into the role of a defeated attorney. "This is Desmond," he said, his voice flat and drained of all energy. "We received your final PDF, Harrison. What more could you possibly want tonight?" It was not Harrison who spoke first. The loud, arrogant voice of Preston echoed through the quiet office. "Just making sure the gold digger has not suddenly found a spine," Preston sneered. His voice was slightly muffled, indicating he was calling from a vehicle, probably his sports car. "We want to be absolutely certain there will not be any last-minute theatrical stunts at the courthouse tomorrow morning." Marcus Jr. chimed in, his tone dripping with unearned superiority. "We are recording this call, Nia. My legal team advised us to get a firm verbal confirmation of your unconditional surrender. We know how sneaky you accountants can be. We want you to state clearly that you are entering this final agreement of your own free will and that you will not attempt to negotiate or alter a single word of the final print." Desmond immediately sprang into action, delivering an award-winning performance. He slammed a hand against his desk, simulating sheer outrage. "This is highly irregular and completely unnecessary, Marcus. My client has already initialed your draconian draft. You are just calling to harass her. I will not allow my client to be subjected to this kind of psychological torture on a recorded line." "Let her speak," Counselor Harrison interrupted, his cold, professional voice cutting through the speaker. "If she refuses to confirm her compliance right now, we will withdraw the $1 million severance offer entirely. We will begin filing the asset freezing motions at dawn." Desmond looked at me, pretending to be utterly powerless. He held his hands up in a gesture of simulated defeat. The stage was perfectly set. I leaned closer to the microphone on the desk. I forced my breathing to become shallow and ragged. I let a highly calculated tremor enter my voice, projecting the exact image of a woman who was terrified, broken, and completely out of options. "Please," I whispered, my voice cracking perfectly on the last syllable. "Please just stop threatening me. I am so tired of fighting you both." A cruel, booming laugh erupted from the speakerphone. It was Marcus Jr., absolutely drunk on his own perceived power. "That is exactly what I wanted to hear," he gloated. "You finally learned your place in the Sterling hierarchy. I just want this nightmare to be over." I continued, maintaining the fragile, shaky tone. "I confirm that I accept the final draft. I will sign the documents tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I will not change a single word. I will take the severance, and I will leave the company to you. Just please leave me alone after tomorrow." Preston let out a dark, satisfied chuckle. "Make sure you dress appropriately for the courthouse, Nia. The press might be watching, and we want you to look your best when you officially hand over the keys to the kingdom. We will see you tomorrow." The call disconnected with a sharp click, leaving a dial tone echoing in the quiet office. The moment the line went dead, my trembling posture vanished instantly. I stood up perfectly straight, smoothing the lapels of my white blazer. My face settled into a mask of absolute unyielding resolve. Desmond looked at me across the desk, a fierce, triumphant light burning in his eyes. "They took the bait completely," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I picked up my designer bag and turned toward the large glass windows, looking out over the sprawling, wealthy neighborhoods of Atlanta. They thought they had secured a $500 million empire. They thought they had humiliated me into total submission. They had absolutely no idea that tomorrow morning the executioner would be waiting for them right at the negotiation table. The morning of the execution arrived with a bright, unforgiving sun glaring off the white marble columns of the Fulton County Courthouse. The crisp Atlanta air carried a crackle of electric anticipation. I stepped out of my Maybach and immediately saw the circus they had orchestrated. A dozen local financial reporters and independent photographers were already swarming the broad stone steps. Marcus Jr. and Preston had deliberately leaked the exact time and location of the signing to the press. They wanted a public spectacle. They wanted my absolute ruin broadcast across every major business network in the state of Georgia. I stood near the base of the stairs watching their grand arrival. A convoy of 3 blacked-out Escalades pulled up to the curb, blocking the pedestrian walkway. Marcus Jr. was the first to emerge. He stepped into the flashing camera lights wearing a custom-tailored charcoal Tom Ford suit, acting exactly like a celebrity tech billionaire, rather than a man inheriting a company he did not build. He waved to the reporters, flashing a bright, rehearsed smile, taking absolute pride in his stolen victory. Chloe slid out of the second vehicle, making sure the cameras captured her every movement. She wore a pristine white designer dress that looked completely absurd for a morning legal proceeding, carrying a rare crocodile Hermes Birkin bag slung over her forearm. She tossed her hair, playing the part of the triumphant heiress, reclaiming her stolen castle. Preston followed closely behind her, buttoning his crisp navy suit jacket. His chest was puffed out, completely intoxicated by the flashing lights and the sheer magnitude of his own inflated ego. I adjusted the cuffs of my simple black tailored suit. I wore absolutely no jewelry and carried a plain leather briefcase. The only accessory I brought with me was a sleek silver Mont Blanc fountain pen tucked securely inside my interior pocket. It was the exact pen Marcus Sr. had given me on our wedding day. Today it would serve as the ultimate instrument of justice. Desmond walked tightly by my side, carrying the heavy binder of relinquishment documents. He kept his shoulders slightly hunched, projecting the flawless image of a beaten attorney dragging his client to the slaughterhouse. As we ascended the massive stone steps, Marcus Jr. spotted me. The cameras were rolling, and he could not resist the opportunity to humiliate me on the public record. He marched directly into my path, forcing Desmond and me to stop right in front of the media gaggle. Several senior members of the Sterling Holdings Board of Directors were waiting near the heavy bronze doors, watching the interaction with keen interest. They were the very board members who had abandoned me, ready to pledge their loyalty to the new king. "Well, if it is not the former lady of the house," Marcus Jr. announced, his voice booming over the chatter of the reporters. "I see you decided to dress for a funeral, Nia. How entirely appropriate. Today marks the official death of your little corporate fantasy. You can finally stop pretending you know how to run a $500 million supply chain. We are taking the keys back today." Chloe sidled up next to her brother, turning her perfect profile toward the nearest camera lens. She put on a sickeningly sweet display of fake sympathy. "We really do pity you, Nia," Chloe said, her voice dripping with artificial grace. "My father made a terrible mistake when he allowed a low-level accountant to infiltrate our family. But because the Sterling bloodline is so generous, we are giving you a $1 million charity package today. We simply could not bear the guilt of watching you end up homeless on the streets of Atlanta. Please use the money to buy a nice, quiet little house far away from our business." Preston stepped into the circle, completing their toxic trio. He looked at Desmond and let out a harsh, mocking laugh. "And tell your pathetic lawyer to stop looking so depressed," Preston sneered. "You two played a good game of deception for 5 years, but the adults are back in charge now. Real corporate warfare requires a specific kind of pedigree that you simply do not possess. You are completely out of your league. Take the severance check and disappear before we change our minds and leave you with nothing." The reporters leaned in, shoving microphones closer to my face, waiting for a fiery response. They wanted me to scream. They wanted me to throw a desperate temper tantrum so they could write headlines about the hysterical gold digger losing her grip on reality. The board members whispered among themselves, shaking their heads at my supposed downfall. I gave them exactly the reaction they demanded. I lowered my eyes, staring down at the cold marble steps. I tightened my grip on my briefcase until my knuckles turned white, physically manifesting the image of a woman paralyzed by sheer humiliation. I did not utter a single word of defense. I let my silence speak volumes of manufactured defeat. Let them have their glorious media moment. Let them print their triumphant headlines claiming total ownership of the company. It would only make the impending federal fallout that much more devastating. Desmond placed a protective hand on my arm and gently guided me through the hostile crowd. We pushed past the gloating heirs and the flashing cameras, walking through the heavy bronze doors into the quiet, highly secured corridors of the courthouse. We headed straight toward the designated conference room where the official notary and the opposing legal team were already waiting to finalize the slaughter. I kept my head down as we walked down the long, echoing hallway, but underneath the shadow of my hair, a slow, dangerous smile finally broke across my face. The performance was flawless. The audience was captivated. The arrogant heirs had just broadcast their absolute ownership and total authority over Sterling Holdings to every major news outlet in the state. They had publicly claimed the empire, completely unaware that they were marching joyfully into a concrete vault with no exit. The heavy oak doors of the courthouse conference room swung shut, sealing us inside a space that smelled faintly of lemon polish and stale coffee. A long, polished table dominated the center of the room. At the far end sat the court-appointed notary, an older woman with sharp glasses and an expression of complete indifference. She had a stack of thick legal binders arranged perfectly in front of her. Harrison and his team of corporate litigators were already unpacking their briefcases, treating the solemn legal environment like their own personal victory lounge. Marcus Jr., Preston, and Chloe burst into the room seconds after Desmond and I took our seats. They bypassed the standard pleasantries entirely. Marcus Jr. threw himself into the leather chair directly across from me, resting his hands flat on the table as if claiming the physical space. Chloe sat next to him, placing her designer bag on the polished wood with a heavy thud. She pulled out her phone immediately, likely preparing to draft her victory post for social media. Preston remained standing behind his wife, acting as the overseeing commander of their triumphant, hostile takeover. Harrison cleared his throat, tapping a thick stack of papers against the table to align the edges. "Let us keep this brief and professional," he announced, looking directly at me with a cold, calculating gaze. "Nia, we have prepared the final execution documents exactly as agreed upon in yesterday's draft. There have been no alterations. By signing these pages, you are authorizing the immediate, irrevocable transfer of 100% of your shares, voting rights, and equity in Sterling Holdings. You are resigning from all board positions, and you are waiving any future claims against the estate, the company, or the new executive officers." Marcus Jr. leaned forward, a cruel smile stretching across his face. "In plain English, Nia, it means you are officially unemployed and permanently locked out. You take your $1 million severance check today, and you never mention the Sterling name again. Are we perfectly clear?" I kept my posture completely rigid, keeping my eyes fixed on the documents in front of the notary. I gave a single, slow nod, projecting the exact image of a woman who had been utterly defeated by superior forces. Desmond sat beside me, perfectly playing the role of the frustrated, helpless attorney. He kept his jaw clenched and stared down at his legal pad, refusing to look at the gloating faces across the table. Harrison slid the master binder across the table. The heavy document stopped directly in front of me. Small red tags marked every single line requiring my signature or initials. It was a massive corporate surrender bound in premium leather. I reached into the interior pocket of my tailored black blazer. My fingers wrapped around the cool, smooth metal of the silver Mont Blanc fountain pen. Marcus Sr. had given me this exact pen on the morning of our wedding. He had told me that a brilliant forensic accountant needed a worthy instrument to write her own destiny. He knew back then that his children were reckless and driven entirely by blind greed. He had spent his final months alive helping me design this very moment. Drawing the pen from my pocket, I felt a profound sense of peace. I was not destroying his legacy. I was protecting it by cutting away the rot that threatened to consume it. I uncapped the pen. The soft metallic click echoed sharply in the quiet conference room. Everyone at the table leaned in slightly, their eyes tracking my every movement. They were holding their breath, terrified that I might suddenly find my courage and refuse to sign. They desperately needed me to complete this transaction so they could claim their ultimate prize. I did not hesitate. I pressed the platinum nib against the thick, textured paper. The ink flowed smoothly as I signed my full legal name on the first page. I turned to the next tab and signed again. The only sound in the room was the rhythmic scratching of my pen against the paper. Marcus Jr. was practically salivating watching the ownership of a $500 million empire transfer into his hands stroke by stroke. I reached the middle section of the binder. I flipped past the aggressive non-disclosure agreements and the draconian reputation clauses. Then I arrived at page 142, the absolute heart of the trap. The dense, highly technical paragraph that explicitly transferred all current, hidden, and future corporate liabilities directly to Marcus Jr. and Chloe. It explicitly stated that the assuming executives took total personal and corporate responsibility for any pending federal audits or offshore financial obligations. Preston shifted his weight behind Chloe's chair, crossing his arms in sheer satisfaction. He was watching me initial the very clause that would legally bind him to a massive offshore fraud investigation. He had absolutely no idea that his expensive legal team had failed to protect him from his own catastrophic financial crimes. I placed my initials perfectly on the designated line. I turned the page and kept signing. My hand never shook, my breathing never hitched. I moved through the remaining documents with the cold mechanical precision of an executioner pulling a lever. When I reached the final page, I signed my name one last time with a bold, sweeping motion. I placed the cap back onto the Mont Blanc pen and set it down next to the binder. I pushed the heavy stack of documents back across the polished wood toward the notary. The notary picked up her heavy brass stamp. She moved through the pages, efficiently stamping and signing her own name to officially authenticate the transaction. Each heavy thud of her stamp felt like a nail being driven into a coffin. When she finished the last page, she closed the binder and handed the primary copy directly to Marcus Jr. "The transaction is complete," the notary stated in a dry, monotone voice. "The transfer of assets and all associated corporate authorities is now legally binding." Marcus Jr. grabbed the binder, clutching it to his chest as if he had just won the lottery. Chloe let out a sharp squeal of delight, clapping her hands together. Preston let out a long, heavy breath of victory, slapping Marcus Jr. on the shoulder. They had done it. They had successfully stolen the empire. They were now the sole undisputed owners of Sterling Holdings, and every single toxic radioactive liability buried deep inside its walls. The transition out of the conference room was immediate and loud. Marcus Jr. led the procession into the grand marble lobby of the Fulton County Courthouse, clutching the leather binder against his chest like a priceless artifact. The oppressive silence of the negotiation room instantly shattered, giving way to a chaotic, loud display of pure, unadulterated arrogance. Harrison and his team of corporate litigators followed closely behind, laughing and slapping each other on the back. They were congratulating themselves on a flawless legal victory, treating the sacred halls of the justice system like the locker room of their private country club. Preston had orchestrated a truly absurd spectacle for this exact moment. He had ordered an assistant to wait near the security checkpoint, holding a chilled bottle of premium vintage champagne and a set of crystal flutes. It was a blatant violation of courthouse decorum, But Preston operated under the firm belief that extreme wealth excused him from basic societal rules. He grabbed the heavy green bottle from his assistant and popped the cork. The sharp explosive sound echoed off the vaulted ceilings, causing several passing clerks and security guards to stop and stare. Preston merely waved a dismissive hand at a frowning guard shouting a promise about a generous donation to the Police Athletic League. Chloe immediately began filming the celebration. She pointed her phone camera at the bubbling champagne glasses, capturing the exact moment her brother and her husband toasted to their victory. She made sure to angle the shot so that I was visible in the background, standing quietly next to Desmond. "Say goodbye to the greatest mistake our father ever made," Chloe announced to her thousands of followers, her voice dripping with fake pity. "We are officially taking out the trash today. Atlanta high society is finally safe from the ultimate social climber. We are scrubbing the sterling name clean." Marcus Jr. raised his crystal flute high into the air. He looked directly at me, his eyes burning with a cruel, triumphant light. A toast to the purification of the bloodline. Marcus Jr. declared, his voice carrying across the sprawling marble lobby. To the end of an era and the absolute destruction of a gold digger. If you ever try to show your face at the Piedmont Driving Club, the High Museum galas, or any corporate summit in the state of Georgia, you will be escorted out by the kitchen doors. You are officially persona non grata nia. You are completely erased from our world. I stood my ground, maintaining a posture of utter defeat. Desmond played his part flawlessly, standing beside me with his shoulders slumped and his gaze fixed firmly on the polished floor. He looked exactly like an attorney who had just suffered the most devastating loss of his entire career. Harrison walked past Desmond, pausing just long enough to deliver a condescending pat on the shoulder. "Better luck next time," Counselor Harrison mocked, flashing a predatory grin. "Perhaps you should stick to defending clients who actually belong in the boardroom. You were completely outmatched today." Desmond clenched his jaw, remaining silent. I let them drink. I let the expensive bubbles fuel their wild delusions of grandeur. They stood in a circle, bragging loudly about their immediate plans for the empire. Preston boasted about firing the current chief financial officer by Friday and replacing the entire board of directors with his own loyal fraternity brothers. Marcus Jr. talked about liquidating the commercial real estate portfolio to fund a massive expansion into international markets. They were constructing a magnificent imaginary future built entirely on a foundation of toxic radioactive debt. Preston reached into the interior pocket of his tailored suit jacket and pulled out a crisp white envelope. He tossed it carelessly onto a nearby marble bench. It landed with a soft slide, stopping just inches from my briefcase. "There is your $1 million cashier check," Preston sneered, taking a long sip of his champagne. "The funds are cleared and ready. Take the money and catch the first commercial flight out of the city. Buy yourself a modest little condo in some forgotten flyover state and disappear entirely. If we ever see you in Atlanta again, our legal team will freeze that money faster than you can blink." The celebration reached its absolute peak. They were laughing, drinking, and taking endless photos with the signed legal binder. The trap was now perfectly sealed. The audience of passing lawyers, court clerks, and security personnel had witnessed their aggressive public claim of total ownership. They had loudly and proudly declared themselves the sole undisputed masters of Sterling Holdings. It was the exact moment I had been waiting for all morning. I took a slow, deep breath. The suffocating weight of the fake defeated persona I had been projecting for days simply vanished. I straightened my spine. I reached up with steady, precise fingers and fastened the center button of my black tailored blazer. I picked up my briefcase and turned to face the laughing group of heirs, my expression hardening into a mask of pure cold calculation. The time for acting was officially over. I stepped forward, leaving the crisp white envelope resting untouched on the cold marble bench. The sharp sound of my heels echoed through the grand lobby, cutting directly through the obnoxious laughter and the clinking of crystal flutes. The sudden shift in my demeanor was impossible to ignore. The slumping, defeated posture I had carried for days was completely gone. I walked with the absolute authority of a woman who owned the very ground beneath her feet. Desmond matched my pace, standing tall and adjusting his tie with a crisp, sharp motion. The miserable broken lawyer routine vanished instantly from his face, replaced by a razor-sharp, predatory grin. He looked directly at Harrison, anticipating the exact moment the arrogant corporate litigator would realize he had just committed the greatest malpractice of his entire career. Marcus Jr. lowered his champagne flute, his triumphant smile faltering just a fraction as I approached their circle. Preston narrowed his eyes, sensing the sudden drop in temperature, but his massive ego prevented him from recognizing the immediate danger. "Are you lost, Nia?" Preston asked, a condescending sneer returning to his face. "The exit is in the other direction. Or did you forget to grovel for a little extra travel money before you leave our city?" I did not look at Preston. I did not acknowledge Chloe, who was still holding her phone up to record the encounter. I bypassed the Heirs entirely and focused my gaze directly on their lead counsel. Harrison was standing a few feet away, wiping a drop of spilled champagne from his expensive suit jacket, acting completely unbothered by my approach. "Harrison," I said, my voice perfectly smooth, but carrying effortlessly across the marble lobby, "I highly suggest you put the champagne down. You have a very long and incredibly difficult day ahead of you." The lawyer stopped wiping his jacket and looked up. He let out a dismissive scoff, clearly amused by my sudden shift in tone. "Is the former accountant trying to give me legal advice?" Harrison mocked, shaking his head. "The ink is already dry, Nia. The transfer is absolute. There are no loopholes for you to exploit, and no extensions for you to file. You signed away the entire company." I did sign away the entire company. I agreed, taking another deliberate step toward him until we were separated by only a few feet of polished marble. Every single share, every voting right, and every hidden piece of corporate debt. I gave your clients exactly what they demanded. But before you pat yourself on the back for executing a flawless hostile takeover, I strongly advise you to open that heavy leather binder you are guarding so fiercely. The surrounding chatter completely died down. The reporters lingering near the security checkpoint noticed the sudden shift in the atmosphere and began moving closer, their camera lenses zooming in on our tight circle. Marcus Jr. glanced at his lawyer, a tiny flicker of genuine panic finally breaking through his arrogant facade. "Open the master file, Harrison," I commanded, my voice dropping to a dangerous, chilling register. "Turn to page 142. I want you to read Section 4, Clause B out loud to your brilliant visionary clients." Harrison hesitated. His arrogant smile froze in place. He looked at my unyielding expression and then down at his heavy leather briefcase. The absolute certainty in my voice triggered a deep primal warning bell inside his sharp legal mind. Slowly, with trembling hands, he set his crystal flute on a nearby marble ledge. He popped the brass latches of his briefcase and pulled out the thick relinquishment agreement. Chloe rolled her eyes, letting out a loud, exaggerated sigh. "This is just another pathetic stalling tactic," she complained, lowering her phone and glaring at me. "Ignore her, Harrison. She is just trying to ruin our moment because she is bitter and broke." Harrison did not ignore me. He flipped rapidly through the thick stack of papers, the crisp pages rustling loudly in the tense silence. He bypassed the non-disclosure agreements and the reputation clauses. He found page 142. He ran his manicured index finger down the block of dense, highly technical text that he had carelessly skimmed over just 24 hours ago. I watched Harrison's eyes dart back and forth across the specific paragraph. I watched as his reading pace slowed to an agonizing crawl. The vibrant, healthy color completely drained from his face, leaving his skin a sickly pale gray. His breathing stopped. The heavy master binder began to shake violently in his hands. The realization of what he had allowed his clients to sign crashed over him like a tidal wave. He slowly raised his head and looked at Preston, his eyes wide with absolute sheer terror. The glorious celebration was officially over, and the trap had just snapped shut. Harrison's voice failed him completely. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a ragged gasp escaped his throat. The heavy leather binder slipped from his trembling hands and crashed onto the marble floor. The sharp, echoing thud caused the remaining corporate litigators to step back in alarm. The celebration abruptly died. Preston scowled his annoyance, quickly replacing his earlier triumphant mood. He snatched the fallen binder from the floor and shoved it back into Harrison's chest. "What is wrong with you?" Preston demanded, his voice laced with venom. "Pull yourself together, Harrison. The press is watching us. Read the damn paragraph and let us get back to our champagne." Harrison could not hold the binder. He let it drop onto the nearby marble bench next to my untouched $1 million severance check. He looked at Preston, his eyes wide with a manic kind of terror. Marcus Harrison stammered, his voice shaking uncontrollably. "Marcus, what did you and Preston do with the Horizon Investment Fund?" Marcus Jr. scoffed, taking a casual sip of his champagne. He waved a dismissive hand, acting as if the question was incredibly beneath him. "What are you talking about, Harrison? Horizon is a private offshore venture. It has absolutely nothing to do with the primary operations of Sterling Holdings. It is completely siloed." "It is not siloed!" Harrison shouted suddenly, losing all of his expensive corporate composure. The pristine attorney was sweating profusely now, unraveling right in front of the flashing cameras. "You told me the company was clean, Marcus. You swore to my firm that there were no hidden encumbrances or undisclosed federal liabilities." Preston grabbed Harrison by the lapels of his suit jacket, shaking him violently. "Calm down and speak English, you overpriced hack. What does the clause say?" Harrison shoved Preston away, smoothing his ruined suit. He pointed a shaking finger at page 142. "It says you just bought a financial graveyard," Harrison explained, his voice dropping to a harsh, desperate whisper. "Clause B explicitly states that by executing this transfer, the new executive officers assume total, absolute, and personal liability for all pending federal audits. It specifically names the Horizon offshore accounts. It states that you willingly absorb any and all financial penalties associated with missing capital. You just legally shielded Nia from the entire mess and painted a massive red target directly on your own backs." Chloe lowered her phone, her live stream completely forgotten. She looked at her husband, her perfectly manicured hands beginning to shake. "Preston, what is he talking about? What is Horizon?" Preston ignored her. He snatched the binder from the bench and aggressively flipped to the page. His eyes scanned the dense legal boilerplate text that Desmond had so carefully crafted. For the first time all morning, the arrogant smirk was completely wiped from Preston's face. He read the words over and over again, desperately searching for a loophole that simply did not exist. "This is illegal!" Preston roared, turning to glare at me. "You cannot hide a massive transfer of liability in the middle of a relinquishment contract. That is corporate fraud, Nia. We will have this thrown out of court by noon." Desmond let out a loud, booming laugh that echoed through the courthouse lobby. He stepped forward, shedding the last remaining trace of his defeated persona. "There is absolutely no fraud here, Preston," Desmond stated with gleeful professional satisfaction. "You demanded a comprehensive transfer of the entire company. We gave you exactly what you asked for. Your legal team reviewed this document for an entire day. They approved every single word. You willingly signed it in front of a court-appointed notary less than 10 minutes ago. It is completely binding. You own it all. The assets, the name, and the catastrophic debt." Marcus Jr. dropped his crystal flute. It shattered against the marble floor, sending expensive champagne splashing across his custom Italian shoes. He lunged toward me, his fists clenched, but Desmond stepped smoothly into his path, blocking him from getting any closer. "You are bluffing," Marcus Jr. shouted, a hysterical edge creeping into his voice. "The corporate debt is protected by the LLC shield. Even if Horizon is bleeding money, they cannot touch our personal assets. They cannot touch the properties. Sterling Holdings has $500 million in real estate to cover any potential losses. We are untouchable." I stood perfectly still, watching the arrogant heir scramble for a lifeline that I had already cut. I looked at the shattered glass on the floor, and then directly into Marcus Jr.'s panicked eyes. "You really should have paid more attention when your father tried to teach you basic corporate structuring, Marcus," I said, my voice ringing with absolute cold authority. "You are operating under the delusion that Sterling Holdings still owns those properties." Preston froze, his eyes darting from me to Desmond. What do you mean still owns? The reporters who had been watching the meltdown with eager fascination now pressed closer, their recording devices capturing every single second of the dramatic collapse. The high society titans who thought they had just secured the ultimate victory were now standing in the middle of a public lobby, realizing they had just signed their own financial death warrants. I took a slow, deliberate step toward Preston, closing the distance between us. The clicking of my heels echoed like a metronome, counting down the final seconds of their dynasty. I did not raise my voice, but the sheer absolute authority in my tone commanded the attention of every single person in that sprawling marble lobby. 6 months ago, I began my words slicing through the tense silence like a scalpel. My husband discovered exactly what you and Marcus Jr. had been doing behind his back. He found the forged vendor invoices. He tracked the initial $70 million you siphoned out of our logistics division to fund your catastrophic offshore gamble in the Horizon accounts. He realized his own son and son-in-law were actively trying to destroy the empire he built from scratch. Marcus Jr. opened his mouth to shout a denial, but the words died in his throat. The senior board members who had supported his hostile takeover just an hour ago were now physically backing away from him, treating him like a walking contagious disease. When Marcus Sr. realized the depth of your betrayal, he came directly to me. I continued, locking eyes with Preston. We spent 3 grueling months executing a massive, completely legal corporate restructuring. We systematically stripped Sterling Holdings down to the absolute studs. We transferred every single lucrative asset out of the parent company. The entire commercial real estate portfolio, the logistics patents, the downtown warehouses, the fleet of supply chain vehicles, and the liquid cash reserves. All of it was legally severed from Sterling Holdings. Where did it go? Preston demanded, his voice cracking with raw panic. You cannot just hide $500 million in physical assets. The board would have to approve a transfer of that magnitude. They did approve it, Desmond interjected, stepping forward with a fresh stack of documents. Marcus Sr. held the majority voting power. He approved the transfer into a highly secured private entity, an irrevocable trust that completely bypassed the probate process. I smiled, letting the cold reality wash over them. Everything of value was moved into the Nia Trust. The entity you just fought so desperately to conquer, Sterling Holdings, is nothing but a hollow shell. It is a completely empty vessel that holds absolutely zero physical assets and generates zero revenue. Its only remaining function is serving as a holding pen for the massive toxic radioactive debt you created. Chloe swayed on her feet, clutching her designer bag, as if it could somehow anchor her to the billionaire reality she was rapidly losing. That is a lie, Chloe shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. You are lying. The downtown skyscraper alone is worth $200 million. The deeds are in the company vault. I turned my gaze to my stepdaughter, feeling absolutely no pity for the woman who had tried to throw me out into the rain. The deeds in the corporate vault are outdated copies, Chloe. The actual property rights were transferred to my private trust before your father even entered hospice care. You just signed a legally binding contract to take ownership of a ghost ship that is currently sinking to the bottom of the ocean. Harrison, the arrogant corporate lawyer, snatched the new documents from Desmond's hand. He flipped frantically through the property tax records and the state registry filings. His eyes darted wildly across the pages, searching for any sign of a bluff. He found nothing but cold, hard, undeniable truth. She is telling the truth, Harrison whispered, his voice completely devoid of his usual aggressive confidence. He looked up at Preston with an expression of pure professional horror. The assets were legally relocated under Section 1031 exchanges and private trust provisions. The holding company you just claimed has a net worth of zero. Actually, given the offshore liabilities, its net worth is severely negative. Preston staggered backward, bumping into the heavy marble pillar behind him. His pristine navy suit suddenly looked like a cheap costume. The swagger, the racist undertones, the smug superiority, it all vanished entirely. He was a man watching his entire life evaporate in front of a live audience. "You set us up!" Marcus Jr. yelled, lunging forward, but the courthouse security guards immediately stepped in, blocking his path. "You knew the company was empty. You let us sign the papers knowing we were inheriting a massive debt. This is entrapment. I let you make your own choices, Marcus. I corrected him, my voice ringing with finality. You chose to embezzle corporate funds. You chose to lock me out of the servers, preventing me from warning you about the restructuring. You chose to draft a ruthless draconian contract that forced you to assume total personal liability for all hidden debts. I did not set a trap. I simply watched you build a cage walk inside and proudly lock the door behind yourselves. The reporters in the lobby were furiously typing on their phones, broadcasting the shocking revelation live to the entire financial world. The brilliant young heirs of the Sterling Empire had just proudly and publicly claimed ownership of a worthless empty shell, effectively volunteering to absorb a devastating amount of criminal debt. The sudden murmurs of the press corps died down as I raised my hand. I wanted absolute silence for the final financial autopsy. I turned my attention back to Marcus Jr., who was currently gripping the edge of a marble security desk to keep his knees from buckling. Let us talk about the exact numbers, Marcus, I said, projecting my voice, so every single microphone could pick up the audio. Let us talk about exactly how much you thought you could steal while your father was dying in hospice care. 6 months ago, you and Preston approached a syndicate of aggressive private equity lenders. You knew the traditional banks would flag the transaction immediately, so you bypassed the legal channels. You forged your father's authorization and leveraged the pristine reputation of Sterling Holdings to secure a massive unregulated loan. Preston was shaking his head frantically, backing away as if he could physically outrun the truth. Do not say it, Preston hissed, his eyes darting wildly toward the reporters recording his every move. You are making this up. It is complete slander. It is $150 million, I stated, dropping the heavy figure like an anvil onto the marble floor. $150 million in cash borrowed against the corporate name and immediately wired to the Horizon offshore accounts. You took that massive sum and dumped it into highly volatile, unregulated cryptocurrency ventures. You genuinely believed you were financial visionaries. You thought you could ride the crypto wave, double the investment, pay back the principal, and pocket a massive fortune before your father took his final breath. Chloe let out a sharp, terrified gasp. She dropped her rare crocodile bag and grabbed her husband's arm, shaking him violently. Preston, tell me she is lying, Chloe shrieked. Tell me you did not borrow $150 million. Preston could not look at his wife. He stared at the floor, his breathing ragged and uneven. They did not just borrow it, Chloe. I continued, ensuring she understood the absolute magnitude of her husband's failure. They lost it. The crypto market tanked. The offshore exchange they used went completely bankrupt overnight. The entire $150 million vanished into thin air. There is nothing left to recover. Marcus Jr. finally found his voice, though it was a weak, pathetic croak. The corporate shield, he stammered frantically, wiping cold sweat from his forehead. The lenders can only seize corporate assets. If the company is empty, they have to write it off. They cannot come after our personal wealth. We are protected by the corporate veil. Desmond stepped forward, his smile sharp and merciless. You were protected by the corporate veil, Marcus. Past tense. Right up until you demanded my client sign that beautiful relinquishment agreement your highly paid lawyers drafted. Desmond pointed directly at Harrison, the pale, terrified attorney who was currently trying to blend into the shadows of the marble pillars. Your brilliant legal team insisted on adding a specific clause to ensure my client could never sue you for mismanagement. But in doing so, you blindly approved Clause 4B. Let me recite it for you, since I happen to have a photographic memory for contracts I helped modify. The entire courthouse lobby held its breath. The assuming executive officers accept total, absolute, and personal liability for all undisclosed corporate debts, offshore financial obligations, and pending audits. Desmond recited, his voice booming with authority. By signing that document today, you explicitly waived your corporate protections. You pierced your own corporate veil. You agreed to take personal financial responsibility for the entire $150 million crater you created. The reality of the situation crashed down on the heirs with suffocating weight. They had not just lost an empire, They had personally guaranteed a debt they could never possibly repay in a dozen lifetimes. The lenders are not going to write off $150 million, I explained smoothly. Since Sterling Holdings has zero assets to liquidate, they are going to come directly for you. They will seize your personal bank accounts. They will seize your luxury vehicles. They will seize Chloe's designer wardrobe and your offshore trust funds. They will garnish every single dollar you ever make for the rest of your natural lives. Preston fell to his knees on the courthouse floor. The expensive tailored navy suit pooled around him as he grabbed his head with both hands. He was a man who had spent his entire life looking down on everyone else, treating me like hired help and mocking my background. Now he was kneeling in the dirt, completely destroyed by his own arrogant greed. Marcus Jr. leaned against the security desk, gasping for air as if the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. He looked at the heavy leather binder still resting on the bench. The very document he had paraded in front of the media as his ultimate victory was actually his financial death warrant. They had played a ruthless game of corporate warfare, and they had just checkmated themselves. The devastating reality paralyzed the heirs completely, but my masterclass in corporate destruction was not entirely finished. I took another step forward, ensuring my voice carried over the frantic typing and hushed gasps of the press corps. There is one final administrative detail we need to clear up before I officially retire, I said, adjusting the strap of my briefcase. Marcus, you mentioned earlier how eager you were to fire the chief financial officer and replace the board at the downtown headquarters. You bragged about liquidating properties from your 70-story glass tower. Marcus Jr. slowly lifted his head, his face a mask of absolute misery. He did not have the strength to issue a clever comeback. He simply stared at me, waiting for the next blow to land. As I explained moments ago, I continued keeping my tone bright and relentlessly professional. That skyscraper is no longer corporate property. It was the centerpiece of the asset restructuring plan. It was successfully transferred into the NIA Trust, entirely unencumbered. Sterling Holdings is now legally classified as an independent third-party tenant operating within my private building. Preston groaned from the floor, burying his face deeper into his hands. He knew exactly where this was going. Since you two gentlemen just proudly signed a legally binding document claiming total ownership of the tenant entity. I smiled, looking down at them. You are now officially my renters, and as your new landlord, I am enforcing the updated commercial lease agreement effective immediately. The rent for occupying the top 5 floors of my building is exactly $2 million a month. Chloe let out a strangled sob, covering her mouth with both hands. Her diamond ring sparkled under the lobby lights, a sharp contrast to the utter ruin she was facing. Rent is due on the 1st of every month, I stated, crossing my arms. Since today is the first week of the new billing cycle, you are currently in arrears. I expect the initial $2 million payment processed by tomorrow afternoon. If the funds do not clear the account, I will have my private security team evict you and throw your imported leather desk chairs onto the sidewalk. You cannot do this! Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. She abandoned her husband on the floor and lunged toward her brother, grabbing his arm. Marcus, tell her she cannot do this. We do not have $2 million. We do not have anything. Marcus Jr. violently shoved his sister away, completely consumed by his own panic. Shut up, Chloe, he barked, his voice trembling. Just shut up. The rent is the least of our problems right now. He was right. As if answering his desperate realization, a low, piercing sound began to build in the distance. It started as a faint wail, but rapidly multiplied into a deafening chorus of heavy sirens echoing through the concrete canyons of downtown Atlanta. The reporters in the lobby turned their cameras toward the towering glass windows of the courthouse entrance. The flashing red and blue lights reflected against the polished marble walls, casting frantic, urgent shadows across the room. These were not the standard local police cruisers that had escorted the heirs off my property yesterday. A convoy of black tactical SUVs violently hopped the curb outside, screeching to a halt right at the base of the courthouse steps. The doors flew open, and a dozen men and women wearing dark windbreakers swarmed out. The bold yellow letters emblazoned across their jackets read, FBI and IRS Criminal Investigation. Preston finally lifted his head from the floor, his eyes widening in pure, unadulterated horror. He scrambled backward, crawling on his hands and knees, trying to put distance between himself and the approaching federal agents. "What did you do?" Preston gasped, pointing a trembling finger at Desmond. "What did you send them?" Desmond adjusted his suit jacket, looking down at the panicked air with a completely satisfied grin. "I did not send them anything, Preston. My client is a forensic accountant with a profound respect for federal law. When she uncovers a massive illegal offshore cryptocurrency scheme involving forged signatures and bank fraud, she has a strict moral obligation to report it to the proper authorities." I checked my watch, noting the exact time. The unscrubbed data from the Horizon accounts was securely delivered to the federal prosecutor's office at exactly 8 o'clock this morning, I explained smoothly. The agents needed time to secure the arrest warrants and freeze your passports. I simply provided them with your current location to save them the trouble of hunting you down. The heavy bronze doors of the courthouse swung open with tremendous force. The federal agents marched into the lobby, their boots hitting the marble with aggressive military precision. The lead agent, a tall man with a stern, uncompromising expression, scanned the crowd before locking his eyes directly on the two men cowering near the security desk. Marcus Sterling Jr. and Preston, the lead agent, announced, his voice echoing with absolute, undisputed authority. "You are under federal investigation for multiple counts of wire fraud, bank fraud, and severe tax evasion. Place your hands where we can see them immediately." The trap was no longer just a financial ruin. It was a concrete prison cell, and the doors had just slammed shut. The moment the federal agents produced their heavy steel handcuffs, the fragile alliance between the two heirs instantly vaporized. The sheer terror of a 20-year federal prison sentence stripped away the last remaining shreds of their fabricated family loyalty. "It was his idea," Preston screamed, pointing frantically at his brother-in-law. "He forged the vendor invoices. I did not sign a single transfer document. He used his executive clearance to bypass the accounting security protocols. I am just a consultant. I did not authorize the wire transfers." Marcus Jr. thrashed violently as an agent grabbed his arm, twisting it firmly behind his back. "He is lying!" Marcus Jr. shrieked, his voice cracking into a pathetic, high-pitched whine. "Preston found the offshore brokers. He made the crypto investments. He has the private digital keys to the wallets. Check his phone right now. He orchestrated the entire fraud from the beginning." They threw each other to the wolves with breathtaking speed. The financial reporters captured every desperate accusation, their cameras flashing incessantly, as the two former titans of Atlanta society wept and begged the federal agents for immunity deals that simply did not exist. Chloe stood paralyzed against the cold marble wall, watching her husband and her brother get forcefully restrained. Her pristine designer makeup was completely ruined by tears of absolute terror as an agent approached her to confiscate her crocodile handbag as potential material evidence. I did not stay to watch the agents read them their Miranda rights. I had orchestrated the complex symphony, and the final explosive crescendo was playing out exactly as my late husband and I had written it. I turned to Desmond and gave him a brief, respectful nod. He tipped an imaginary hat to me, offering a silent acknowledgement of the greatest corporate execution either of us had ever witnessed. I turned my back on the screaming heirs and walked smoothly across the grand lobby. The heavy bronze doors opened for me, letting in the crisp, bright sunlight of the late morning. I walked down the sweeping stone steps, completely unbothered by the chaos unfolding just a few feet behind me. My driver was waiting by the curb, standing perfectly at attention beside the gleaming black Maybach. He opened the rear door with practiced efficiency. I slipped into the plush leather interior, settling back into the quiet, luxurious sanctuary. The door closed with a solid, reassuring thud, instantly muting the distant sounds of federal sirens and desperate shouting. "Drive," I said softly, leaning back against the headrest. The Maybach pulled smoothly away from the curb, merging seamlessly into the bustling downtown traffic. Above the courthouse, a sweeping aerial view captured the perfect final tableau. The flashing red and blue lights of the tactical federal vehicles completely surrounded the grand entrance of the Justice Building. Inside, the architects of their own destruction were being marched into concrete holding cells, while my car glided effortlessly away, disappearing into the vast, sprawling city. The empire was finally purged. The debt was permanently settled. The game was officially over,